Daniel ran through the neon streets with fear burning in his chest. His feet pounded against the cracked stone ground, echoing between the tall alien towers. Strange lights glowed on every wall, symbols that he could not read. But all of them seemed to watch him as he fled. His breath came hard, his throat dry, and behind him the heavy steps of the debt collectors shook the street. They shouted in a language that scratched the air like broken metal. He did not look back. He knew what would happen if they caught him. He turned down a narrow alley, his heart racing. Steam rose from pipes along the walls, and the shadows stretched long and sharp. Alien faces appeared in windows above, their eyes glowing in the dim light, watching him with silent curiosity. They knew a human was being hunted. They knew what it meant, but no one stepped forward to help. Daniel was alone in a world that was not his. The footsteps behind him grew louder. His legs burned as he pushed forward, but his body was failing. He had been running for too long. His mind screamed for a place to hide, a place where no one would think to look. Every corner he turned only led him deeper into the maze of the alien city. He could smell the smoke of their machines, hear the distant hum of their ships above, but all that mattered was the sound of those steps chasing him closer and closer. Daniel's chest ached. He pressed his hand against the cold wall for a moment, gasping for air. His head spun and fear clouded his thoughts. The debt collectors were ruthless, towering creatures with no mercy. He had seen what they did to those who failed to pay. He could not let that be his fate. Not here, not tonight. He forced his legs to move again, stumbling forward as the alley opened into a larger street. Alien markets stretched before him, filled with stalls glowing under strange lamps. The air smelled of spices, smoke, and something rotten. Crowds of alien citizens moved slowly, their tall bodies covered in cloaks, their skin glowing faintly under the light. Daniel pushed through them, hoping the mass of bodies would slow his pursuers. But their angry shouts cut through the crowd like knives. The aliens stepped aside, unwilling to block the hunters' path. No one wanted to anger the debt collectors. Daniel's panic grew. His eyes darted in every direction, searching for escape. His pulse hammered in his ears. Then, through the haze of fear, he saw it. At the far end of the street, past rows of metal doors. One door stood slightly open. A faint glow of steam drifted out into the night. He could hear muffled voices and laughter echoing from inside. He did not think twice. He pushed himself harder, weaving through the crowd, ignoring the cries of protest as he shoved past. He reached the door and slipped inside, pulling it shut behind him. Darkness and heat swallowed him at once. The smell of damp cloth and sweat filled his nose. He pressed his back against the door, holding his breath. The sound of footsteps thundered past outside, and the shouts faded as the debt collectors rushed down the street. For the first time in what felt like hours, Daniel let out a long breath. He had escaped them, at least for now, but as his eyes adjusted to the dim light inside, his relief turned to dread. The room was large, with metal walls and rows of lockers stretching into the shadows. Steam curled around him, carrying the scent of soap and heated stone. He heard laughter again, clearer now, and heavy footsteps moving closer. His blood ran cold as he realized where he was. This was not an empty building. This was a private chamber. And those voices did not belong to men. Daniel's eyes darted across the room. Baskets filled with towels and strange alien clothing were stacked near the lockers. Long benches lined the walls, and drops of water echoed as they fell onto the stone floor. Somewhere deeper in the room, 3 figures moved. He caught glimpses of them through the mist. Tall, broad, with glowing green skin and silver-white hair that gleamed even in the low light. Their voices were strong, filled with amusement, and their laughter carried the weight of confidence. Daniel's stomach twisted. He had stumbled into the locker room of alien warriors. Not just any warriors, but women whose bodies were built with strength beyond anything human. Their muscles flexed as they walked, towels draped loosely around them, their movements heavy and powerful. They spoke in their language, sometimes laughing, sometimes mocking, their voices rolling like thunder. He pressed himself deeper into the shadows, his heart racing once more. The danger outside had been terrible, but the danger here was something new, something he had never imagined. If they saw him, they would crush him without hesitation. To them, a human sneaking into their sacred space would be more than an insult. It would be a crime. Daniel looked around desperately for a place to hide. His eyes landed on one of the laundry bins overflowing with damp towels and heavy fabric. The voices were growing louder, footsteps drawing closer, and he knew he had no choice. He hurried to the bin, climbing inside and pulling the cloth over himself. The fabric smelled strange, thick with sweat and unfamiliar scents, but it was better than being seen. He held his breath, sinking lower until only darkness surrounded him. Through the cloth, he could still hear their voices, still feel the vibration of their heavy steps on the stone floor. His body trembled, every muscle tense, every heartbeat loud enough that he feared they would hear it. He told himself he would stay quiet just for a few minutes until the danger outside passed. Then he would leave, unseen, unheard, but deep. Inside, he knew he had not found safety. He had only traded one danger for another. The hunters outside had not caught him yet, but inside this room of alien queens, his fate was already turning. Daniel crouched inside the laundry bin, his body shaking under the weight of damp towels. The air was thick, hot, and heavy with the smell of soap and sweat. Every sound seemed too loud in his ears. He could hear his own heartbeat, fast and uneven, as if it would burst from his chest. He pressed himself lower, afraid even to breathe. Outside, the footsteps grew closer, slow and heavy, the sound of giants moving across the locker room floor. Through the fabric that covered him, Daniel caught faint glimpses of green light. The alien warrior women were walking past the bins, their silver hair catching the dim glow of the lamps above. They spoke to each other in their sharp, rolling language. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they muttered, their voices like thunder, rumbling in a storm. Each sound made Daniel's body tense. He could not understand the words, but he knew the tone. They were proud, fearless, and strong. These were not women who could be tricked or fooled. If they found him, it would be the end. The air grew hotter as more steam filled the room. Drops of water hit the stone floor with soft echoes. Daniel imagined them drying their skin, wrapping towels around their powerful bodies, speaking about battles fought and victories won. His mind painted images he could barely hold, green skin glowing with strength, shoulders wide and arms strong, enough to snap him in half. He thought of the debt collectors outside and realized he had only jumped from one danger to another. One of the warriors laughed loudly, the sound making the towels around him shake. Daniel froze. The bin rocked slightly as heavy steps approached. He gritted his teeth, clenching his jaw to stop it from shaking. The fabric above him shifted, letting in a faint glow of light. He dared not move, dared not even blink. A green hand rested on the edge of the bin. His breath caught in his throat. The warrior stood just above him, her shadow falling over his hidden form. He could hear her sniffing the air as if she sensed something strange. She muttered something, her voice low and thoughtful. Daniel pressed, his body deeper into the pile of towels, every nerve in his body screaming to remain still. Then, after a long moment, she moved away. Daniel let out a slow, silent breath, his chest aching from holding it so long. Relief washed through him like cold water. He thought for a moment that fate might be kind to him. Maybe they would never notice. Maybe he would survive this night, after all. But the relief did not last. The fabric above him shifted again, this time from his own trembling. A damp towel slid down the pile and fell to the floor, leaving his arm partly exposed. The pale skin of his hand caught the dim light. He pulled it back quickly, but the sound of the towel hitting the ground was enough. The laughter stopped. The voices turned sharp. Daniel's stomach dropped. Heavy steps came closer, 3 of them now circling the bin. He could feel their eyes piercing through the cloth, hunting for what did not belong. The towels above him moved as one of them poked at the pile. A rough voice asked a question. Another answered with suspicion. Then silence filled the room. Daniel knew what would come next. The cloth ripped away, and the sudden light blinded him. He blinked rapidly, his vision clearing to reveal 3 towering figures standing over him. Their green skin glistened with heat and steam, their silver hair falling around their faces like shining steel. Each one was wrapped in a towel, their muscles thick and heavy beneath. Their eyes glowed with fire as they looked down at him. For a moment, none of them spoke. Their faces shifted between shock and anger, curiosity and disbelief. A human, small and weak, hiding in their sacred place. Daniel's body shook as he tried to push himself deeper into the bin, but it was useless. He had been caught. One of the warriors leaned closer, her glowing eyes narrowing as she studied his face. She said something sharp to the others, and they laughed, though it was not the soft laughter he had heard before. This laughter was cruel, mocking, filled with the promise of pain. Another reached down and grabbed him by the collar, pulling him up with one hand as if he weighed nothing. Daniel's legs kicked helplessly in the air, his hands clawing at her grip. She lifted him higher, bringing him face to face with her. Her breath was hot, her eyes burning into his. She spoke slowly, her words cold. And though Daniel did not know the language, he understood her meaning. She wanted to know why he was there. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out at first. His mind was blank, drowned in fear. Then, with a shaking voice, he begged. He told them he was running from hunters, that debt collectors wanted his life. He said he was desperate, that he had nowhere else to go. His words tumbled out in broken whispers, his eyes wide with terror. The warrior's expression did not change. She looked at the others, who muttered among themselves. One of them laughed again, shaking her head as if amused by his weakness. Another sneered, her grip tightening around his collar. Daniel gasped, choking for air. The first warrior raised her hand, silencing them. She set him down roughly on the floor, her eyes never leaving his. For a moment, Daniel thought she might spare him. But then the door at the far end of the room shook violently. The sound of fists pounded against the metal, the voices of the debt collectors roaring from outside. Daniel's heart stopped. They had found him. Daniel stood frozen on the wet stone floor, his clothes damp from the towels that had hidden him. 3 towering warrior women surrounded him, their green skin glowing faintly under the mist, and their silver hair shining like blades. Their bodies were strong, carved with muscle, their eyes burning with anger and amusement. He felt small, fragile, and weak beneath their gaze. One of them spoke first, her voice sharp and heavy. Daniel could not understand the words, but the tone cut through him like a knife. She stepped closer, her towel wrapped around her broad shoulders, and raised her hand as if deciding whether to strike him or question him. The other 2 muttered, one laughing cruelly, the other tilting her head as if studying him with curiosity. Daniel raised his hands, his voice shaking. "Please," he whispered. "I was running. I had nowhere else to go. I did not mean to enter this place. They were chasing me." The tallest warrior crouched low, bringing her glowing eyes level with his. Her expression was unreadable. She spoke slowly, her words deliberate, and then pointed at the door where the pounding still echoed. She wanted to know who hunted him. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry, and nodded toward the noise. "The debt collectors," he said, his voice breaking. "They will kill me." The warrior stared at him for a long moment before rising again. She said something to the others, and their reactions were clear even without the words. One scoffed, flexing her arms as if mocking his weakness. Another smirked, her eyes narrowing with dangerous amusement. The third, the tallest, seemed thoughtful, but her face remained hard. Suddenly, the pounding on the door grew louder. The metal frame rattled, dust falling from the ceiling. The voices outside shouted demands, harsh and ugly. Daniel's heart thudded in his chest. He had been caught once already. Now he would be caught again, and this time there would be no escape. The warriors turned their attention to the door. Their bodies shifted, their muscles tense, their jaws set with grim focus. For the first time, Daniel saw not laughter, not amusement, but the cold readiness of fighters. They were deciding whether to let the hunters inside or to fight them. Daniel's knees shook. He wanted to beg again, to plead with them. But his words caught in his throat. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with steam and tension. Every drop of water that hit the floor sounded like thunder in his ears. The tallest warrior stepped forward, placing her massive hand on his shoulder. Daniel flinched, but her grip was firm, not cruel. She looked into his eyes with a gaze that pierced him to his core. Then she spoke a single word in her language, slow and commanding, as if testing if he would understand. He did not. But her tone told him enough. She was asking if he wanted to live. Daniel nodded quickly, his eyes wide with fear. "Yes, I want to live." His voice cracked with desperation. The warrior studied him for another moment, then released his shoulder. She turned back to the others, speaking in low, powerful words. The women exchanged sharp replies, their voices rising in disagreement. One gestured toward Daniel angrily, as if demanding they throw him out. Another shrugged, her smirk suggesting she wanted to see what would happen if they kept him. The tallest silenced them with a wave of her hand. Her word was final. Daniel did not know what she had decided. His body trembled with dread. His eyes flicked to the door as another loud crash echoed through the chamber. The debt collectors were close to breaking in. His chest ached with panic. He did not know which was worse, the monsters outside or the warriors inside. One of the women moved suddenly, stepping behind him. She shoved him forward, forcing him onto his knees. Daniel's palms slapped against the wet stone floor. He gasped, his breath ragged, but did not resist. He had no strength left to fight. The women circled him like predators, their eyes glowing brighter in the mist. The tallest reached down again, lifting his chin with one finger so he had to meet her gaze. Her eyes were fierce, but not without thought. She studied his face. His trembling lips, the fear that poured from every part of him. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, slowly, she smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was not a cruel one either. It was something deeper, something that made Daniel's blood run cold. She had made her decision, though he could not yet understand it. The door shuddered violently. The metal bent inward. The hunters outside roared, their voices so loud they rattled the lockers against the wall. Daniel flinched, his heart racing. The tallest warrior stepped back, raising her hand. The other two warriors stopped moving, their attention fixed on her. She barked a sharp order, and they obeyed instantly, moving to stand near the door. Their bodies loomed tall, shoulders broad, muscles tense, ready for the fight. Daniel stared, in disbelief. They were preparing to meet the collectors head-on, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with strength. But then one of the women looked back at him, her glowing eyes narrowing, her lips curling into a grin. She spoke a single word, and though Daniel did not know the language, he understood. He was part of this now. His fate would be decided not only by the hunters at the door, but by the warriors who had found him. He had stepped into their world, and there would be no escape. The door split with a deafening crack, metal twisting and sparks flying. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. He pressed his hands against the floor, his eyes wide with terror. Warriors stood tall, their towels slipping slightly as they flexed their powerful arms, their eyes glowing brighter than ever. They were ready for blood. And Daniel realized with a cold, sharp fear that when the door opened, he might not live to see another sunrise. The door burst open with a scream of tearing metal. The sound rang through the chamber, sharp and violent, and steam rushed outward as the hunters forced their way in. Daniel's body jerked backward, his eyes wide as shadows filled the doorway. The alien debt collectors stepped inside, their massive frames glowing in the dim light. Their faces were hidden behind masks of black iron, their voices guttural as they shouted. Their weapons glowed with dull blue fire, humming with deadly energy. Daniel's heart dropped into his stomach. They had found him. There was no way to hide now. The warrior women did not flinch. They moved forward with heavy steps, their towels falling loose around their shoulders, revealing bodies carved with strength. Their green skin shone wet with steam, their muscles coiled like ropes of iron. Their silver hair glistened, falling across their broad backs as they squared themselves against the hunters. They spoke in low voices, sharp and commanding, their tone carrying the weight of authority. The tallest warrior stepped ahead of the others, her gaze like fire. She spread her arms wide, her towel slipping to the floor, and shouted something. That echoed like a challenge across the chamber. Her voice was steady, proud, unshaken. The debt collectors hesitated, their heavy boots scraping against the stone. The warriors charged, their feet pounded like drums, the stone shaking under their weight. Their hands, massive and unyielding, struck the collectors with force that echoed like thunder. One warrior grabbed a weapon and crushed it with her bare hands, the blue light sputtering out in a shower of sparks. Another slammed her shoulder into a collector, throwing him across the room into the lockers. The third roared with laughter as she twisted the arm of her enemy, snapping bone with sickening ease. Daniel could hardly breathe. The sight was beyond belief. These women fought with no fear, no hesitation. Their power was raw, unstoppable, a storm of muscle and fury. The collectors, armed and armored, stumbled under the assault. Their weapons hissed and cracked, but the warriors pressed forward, their glowing eyes fixed on victory. A hand grabbed Daniel's arm suddenly, pulling him up from the floor. He gasped, looking up into the eyes of the tallest warrior. She had returned to him, her chest heaving with battle, her face hard and unyielding. She bent low, speaking to him in her deep voice, words he did not understand. But her tone was clear. She was telling him to stay behind her. Daniel stumbled backward, pressing himself against the lockers as she turned once more to the fight. He wanted to scream, to run, but his legs locked in place. His breath came in ragged bursts as he watched. The storm raged before him. The hunters fought back with desperation. One swung his weapon like a club, striking the smirking warrior across the shoulder. She staggered, her towel falling away completely, but instead of pain, she let out a roar of rage. She lifted the hunter by his throat and hurled him against the wall so hard the stone cracked. Another hunter tried to force past them, his eyes locked on Daniel. He shouted, his arm raising the glowing weapon. Daniel froze, his body shaking with terror. The weapon fired. Blue light cut across the room toward him, but in that instant, the tallest warrior moved. She threw herself in front of the blast, her massive arm catching the beam. The light burned against her skin, but she did not fall. With a roar, she grabbed the weapon and ripped it from the hunter's hands, snapping it in two as if it were made of glass. Daniel's mouth fell open in shock. She had taken the hit meant for him. The hunters began to falter. Their roars grew, desperate, their strikes weaker. The warriors pressed harder, each blow landing with bone-breaking force. The steam grew thick, the air hot with sweat and fire. One by one, the hunters fell. Their bodies crashed against the stone, their weapons broken, their masks dented and shattered. Silence followed at last, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing. The chamber smelled of smoke, sweat, and scorched metal. Sparks still hissed from the broken lockers. Daniel stood frozen, his chest rising and falling rapidly, his eyes wide with disbelief. The warriors stood tall, their chests heaving, their bodies gleaming with sweat and heat. They looked down at the fallen collectors, then at Daniel. Their expressions were not gentle, not kind, but full of something new. Respect, perhaps, curiosity, or a strange recognition that fate had placed him in their path for a reason. The tallest warrior stepped forward again. Her massive hand reached down, gripping his arm, not harshly, not cruelly, but firm, like stone. She pulled him to his feet and stared into his eyes. Daniel trembled under her gaze. His mouth opened, but no words came. She spoke instead, slow and deep, her words rolling like distant thunder. He did not understand the language, but he understood the meaning. "You are ours now." Daniel's chest tightened. His heart raced, not with the sharp terror of the chase, but with something heavier. His fate had shifted again, and this time he was not free. These women had spared him, defended him, but not without purpose. They had chosen to keep him. He looked at the broken door, at the bodies of the hunters lying silent, at the flames still burning faintly in the lockers. His life as he had known it was gone. He was no longer a man on the run. He was something else now, something bound to the will of the alien queens. The tallest warrior released his arm, but her eyes never left his. She turned to the others, her voice strong as she gave her command. The women nodded, their expressions fierce. Daniel realized he had not been saved. He had been claimed. And as the steam curled higher and the room fell silent again, he wondered in cold dread what price he would pay for this new fate. Daniel stood among the smoke and steam, his body weak, his knees trembling. Around him, the debt collectors lay broken across the floor, their weapons shattered, their masks split. The chamber smelled of burnt metal and sweat, the echoes of the fight still hanging in the heavy air. The warriors stood tall in the silence, their green skin glowing faintly in the haze, their silver hair damp and shining like steel under the dim lights. Daniel's chest heaved as he tried to breathe. He could hardly believe he was still alive. Every moment of the fight replayed in his mind, the roaring voices, the crushing blows, the blue fire that had almost ended him. He had hidden, he had begged, he had cowered, and yet